Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make a heater that will genuinely heat a large size room such as this greenhouse. I've used this before as an emergency heater. I've also used it in times when the greenhouse was just not getting warm enough and I needed to keep the temperatures high enough so I wouldn't freeze any of my plants. So this works for an emergency heater, it will work for a power outage, it will work in a campsite, in an area or a building where you have no heat. So this is a really great way to heat a room very quickly and for very low cost. It is super simple to put together. So let's get started on this. You're going to be amazed at how well this works. So guys, you can use whatever type of cans you want to, but I've found that a Dole pineapple can is one of the best. It has no sprayed in lining. A lot of these cans will have kind of a waxy sprayed in substance. I don't even know what it is, but they'll do that. So make sure whatever type of can you're using that you examine the interior of the can and make sure you don't see any sprayed substances in there. So what we're using, like I said, a Dole pineapple can, and this can right here, which is slightly smaller and a little bit shorter as well. The diameter is a little bit thinner. We're going to use some very special material to put in here to make this heat really well, and we need to do a little bit of engineering on the larger can itself to make this work perfectly. And I'll tell you about the best fuel to use, the safest fuel, and one that will burn for quite a long time. Especially when you're in a power outage, you really need something like this to heat up an area in an emergency situation. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is you need to remove the label. You're probably going to have a little bit of glue on it as well, so you may want to run it through a scouring pad and remove that around the edges. Sometimes it's not too easy to get off there because it's glued on, so just remember, you take a razor blade, do a little bit of scratching there. You could use some sandpaper, whatever you got on hand. You could use something like a scouring pad, one of the stainless steel ones. Go back and forth until you remove all that, and then you'll find that it's fairly clean. So I'm going to remove it from our second can here. Cut across there. Be really careful with these blades. They can be super easy to injure yourself. This one, the same thing. You got a little bit of glue there. As I said, it's not too hard to remove this glue. If you have a dishwasher handy, you can run these through a dishwasher and it'll kind of melt away some of this glue sometimes. So that's a super easy way to do it, is removing those sticky glues there. Now, as I said earlier, this smaller can is a really tight fit. There's only about probably even less than 1/4 of an inch, but close to 1/4 of an inch all the way around the diameter. So that's one thing we want to make sure we do, is that this inner can is got just enough room, because we're going to add a very special material in between the lining of this can to make this work. Next thing we need to do is we need to set up a pin so we know exactly where the top of this can is on the inside of this. So just take your outer can and just go around the edges with the Dole pineapple can. Just mark all the way around. I still got to remove this stuff before we go into the next step. But we want to make sure we're at just the right spot. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit hard to see in the reflection of the greenhouse, but I can see clearly where the top of the inner can is going to sit. So that makes it a little bit easier to mark that like that. Now, when you're doing this drilling, you want to make sure you're wearing a really thick pair of leather gloves, because there can be some quite sharp edges on this material when you do that. The type of drill bit we're using is a very special type of bit. It's a step drill bit, excellent for drilling into metal. This right here will make the cleanest cut possible. So you can get a set of these pretty cheaply. I'll put a link in the description too. I think it was a set of 3 and they were very cheap. So this is a great way to drill the holes. Remember, we're going to go all the way around our outer can and put a good maybe 1/2 inch hole all the way around, about maybe 1/2 inch apart all the way around. That's going to add a little bit of extra oxygen to our can and help our flame burn as well as it can and produce the maximum amount of heat. Now, one thing you want to do when you get through drilling these holes is, you see there's a lot of small metal shavings. Make sure you empty that into the trash, because these are really sharp. If you're doing this in a kitchen or in a basement where you might walk in barefoot, this would be a really painful thing to do, to step on this. So make sure you dispose of this properly and very carefully, because you don't want to step on this by accident. Now, a lot of people are not aware of this product right here. This is carbon felt, and it's used by plumbers when they're welding pipes together using a torch. They'll hold this up to a wood area to help protect the wood and cause any possible fires under a home or wherever they're working, in a basement or a garage. So this material, although it looks like just an ordinary material, is actually, I guess it's commonly called carbon felt. But you can get this online. I'll put a link in the description. But it can handle thousands of degrees of heat without burning up. So this is going to act as our wick in our system here, in our small heater that puts out a massive amount of heat in a very short amount of time. Now we want to make sure that this can is completely wrapped in carbon felt. Another thing you want to make sure is you have just a slight amount of the carbon felt above the rim of this can. Now the bottom of this can is actually going to sit like that inside of our inner can. This is going to be our top. So we want to wrap our carbon felt and make sure that we have it completely wrapped. And so I'll cut it right here, and so there won't be any overlap, or there shouldn't be any overlap, and then that way we'll be sure and have it at just the right length. A little bit hard to tell, but this cuts very easily just like any other type of fabric, but this fabric, as I said, is a very special type of fabric. Okay, so my cutting isn't perfect, but it's pretty close to where I want it to be. And so as you can see, there's a lot of the carbon felt above the rim of this can. Now, of course, as I said earlier, we're going to flip the can over, and the closed side is actually going to be to the inside top of our now cut Dole pineapple can. So there you go. We're going to carefully place this inside and try not to let it bunch. So it takes a little bit of twisting motion to get it to go in there perfectly. If it's up too high, can be a little bit of an issue, so you may want to trim just a little bit off around the top. We don't want it too high, maybe a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch all the way around this inner can. Now there's a couple of different configurations. I tried the first configuration, and this interior can was a little too tight for the very thick material here. So what I did is I took another can that I'd used in a previous stove, and I put it inside there. This has a hole already drilled in it. We're going to seal this hole with a coin or anything else just to keep the flame at a minimum there. We want the flame around the edges there. So let's put this into our outer can. Drop it in place. And so as you can see, the air intake ports are all the way around the outside. So you don't see it there, but we're going to put some fuel in it. This fuel we're using, I'm going to talk for a second about that, but this particular type of can setup is going to have the maximum air intake and the maximum heat. And of course we have our carbon felt wick that's going to pull our fuel to the top. And there's a lot of different types of fuel you can use, but this was all alcohol based. So this is basically an alcohol burning stove that's going to put out a massive amount of heat. Now I'll talk just for a second about alcohol-based fuels. This is what I believe to be the best fuel. This is actually made for marine stoves and alcohol burning stoves. So we want to say that this is the cleanest burning. This is going to be more expensive, but you can get this in gallon size. You can store it in your camping gear or in your pantry for emergencies. The second best is probably going to be isopropyl alcohol, but 99% is going to burn almost as clean as the denatured. And then you have 91 and 70. These are not going to burn near as clean. They can put off a little bit more soot and things like that. So I would absolutely recommend this as 1, and then the 99% is 2 for the purity of the burn, and also the length of the burn is going to be longer on these. So about refueling or fueling for the first time, you want to make sure your carbon felt is saturated with your fuel. You can take an ordinary funnel and put it into your interior hole there, and then you can add your fuel. Do this very carefully and make sure that your alcohol burning device is not still hot from a previous burn. So let's put some in there. I'm only going to probably put about 50% fill in there, but at 100% fill, where you're close to these drilled out holes, you're going to find that you get quite a long burn time. So let me just refill it. We'll do some temperature testing and show you how much cleaner this particular product burns, which is the denatured alcohol. All right, so be careful when you first light it. I always recommend using a kitchen torch and not matches. Remember, you can have vapor, so stand back when you light it for the first time. All right, so I've cut the lights off in the greenhouse after lighting it, and it's still taking a little bit of time to wick that fuel up to the top, but it is starting to get warmer. You can see there's a lot of air intake going on. I guess you can see that. And it's, like I said, it's just taking a little bit of time. So give it some time. It doesn't light instantly, but once you get the hang of it after trying it 2 or 3 times, you'll find that it lights quite well. And you kind of get that swirling effect of flame once it gets started quite well. I'll try to capture that on film. It's not too easy, but it is working great. Now, as you can see, there's mostly a blue flame there, and that's the purity of the burn. So I just want to say that this really is one of the safer fuels to use. I would recommend using this. I'm having a little bit of problem with the wicking, so I would absolutely recommend that you give it some time, and if it's not wicking properly, as you can see here, I probably don't have enough fuel in it, but I'm going to have to wait till it cools down before I try to reignite it. That's a really important thing, that you wait till the appliance cools down before you do a relight. Now, there's a little bit of trial and error involved here, but I will tell you, once it gets to going well, let me reset it right there on a cold surface, and we can do a little bit of test there. Around 550 to 600, bouncing around a little bit there. The can has become quite hot. Down here at the bottom, the can is quite cool. So you can see all your heat is right up here at the top, and it works as a great heating appliance. You can also cook on it. I was going to talk about this as well. You can take a self-tapping metal screw, put these, maybe 6 of these around the edges, and you'll be able to set a pan on top of this. You may need a little bit larger L bracket depending on what size can you have, but I'd say you could put maybe 6 there, and that would help stabilize the pan. So if you wanted to use it as a cooking device, you could do that as well. Now, I'm trying not to get the camera too close to this because it is quite hot, but you can see the air intake vents are working perfectly. The fuel is coming up around the carbon felt, and I'll try not to bounce around there too much, but as you can see, it's working exactly as it's designed to do. Plenty of oxygen, clean fuel, and putting out lots of heat. Now, one thing I did do to the innermost can is the one that was wrapped with our carbon felt. I made it into almost like Swiss cheese. I put a lot of holes in it because I found that it wasn't wicking quite the way I wanted it to. I wanted to have that wicking action moving faster. So that interior can, the innermost can that looked like it had been used before, I put a lot more holes in it to make it wick even better. And so now you can see that air intake is working great. It's putting out a lot of heat. You could cook on this. You could heat for, I've been running it now for about 30 minutes. So I'd say on a full filled, not completely to the top, but about 3/4 of the way up, I would say you'd get at least a solid 2-hour burn off of it, and a very clean burn. There's no smells in the greenhouse. Although when you do burn carbon felt the first time, sometimes you can get just a minute, maybe 30 seconds of smoke. So don't be surprised by that. When the carbon felt does do a little bit of smoke when you first light it, but that's just some of the debris in the manufacturing process. Once that's through happening, you won't have any more smoke. You could take a torch to it and do a little bit of a test right there to get some of that off of it. But once that happens, you get a very clean burn, no odors at all in the greenhouse. But this would definitely heat overnight. I could put 2 of these in the greenhouse and I wouldn't have to worry about it being freezing cold in the morning. So I'll give you one more quick glance of how the air intake works. That's really a critical thing because it helps increase the airflow, and the flame works a lot better. You get a lot more heat out of it and a clean burn of that oxygen intake. So that's one thing that you do have to do on the outer pineapple can. Make sure you put those right where you're going to have your carbon felt. You can see that it's working really great. You see all around this area here, you can see the flames, and it's doing it in a 360 pattern. So guys, if you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first. I always put those questions to the front of the line. Also, if you would like this type of content, I have a Patreon that I'm adding new content to all the time. I have free PDFs, and you can see a lot of stuff there. You can join up there, and that'll really help the channel grow. But this is working quite well, and it's actually one of my favorite heaters. This is the second time I've done this. I did the same thing last year as a test, but I never made it into a video. So this is the second year, and it is working exactly as it did last year. So I would highly recommend this for an emergency situation, as a camp stove, as a cooking stove on your camping trips or hiking trips, which I love to do. But this really is something that doesn't take up a lot of room, and it doesn't hardly cost anything to make. It's actually something you're going to be throwing in the trash. So other than the fuel to put this together, it's almost nothing. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and have a great day.